You're watching UATV News. My name is Inna Kosinska. Good evening. The updated resolution on human rights in the occupied Crimea was adopted by the UN General Assembly. The document states that the bodies and officials operating in the peninsula are not legitimate and should be called the occupying authorities of the Russian Federation. The inadmissibility of politically motivated persecution, torture, arbitrary detention is emphasized. The facts of destruction of the cultural and natural heritage of Crimea are also pointed out. The resolution also calls on the UN countries to cooperate within the international Crimean Platform. 65 countries voted for the document, 25 against, 85 abstained. Among the states that stood against were in particular Russia, Belarus, China, India, Iran and Armenia.
Depression and hopelessness, that is what local population faces today in the temporarily occupied Crimea. Systematic human rights abuses and violations have turned Crimea into a land of fear, not the land of the Crimean Tatar people, the indigenous people of the peninsula, expelled from their homeland in 1944 by the regime of Stalin, have again become a direct target of intimidation, harassment and terror, forcing them to leave.
Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Kuleba, welcomed adoption of the updated resolution by the UN. He stressed that it was possible to strengthen the previous document, in particular to include in the text the responsibility of Russia for observance of the rights of the Crimean Tatars and the requirement to cancel the sentences that were passed in absentia against the leaders of the Crimean Tatar people. This is the sixth resolution of the UN General Assembly on the protection of human rights in the Russian-occupied Crimea.
The document calls on UN member states to strengthen cooperation within the Crimean Platform to improve the situation with the human rights in Crimea. The resolution demands from Russia to stop groundless detentions and arrests of Crimean residents, to release illegally detained citizens of Ukraine, in particular Emir Hussein Kuku, Halina Dovhopola, Server Mustafayev, Vladislav Yesipenko, Nariman Jelalov and others. We will continue to make every effort to deoccupy the Ukrainian peninsula and bring Russia to international legal responsibility. Dmytro Kuleba, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, from a statement on the website of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine.
$756 million in aid to Ukraine is provided by the draft US budget for next year. This was also announced by the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Of this, $400 million will be allocated to strengthen the security of Ukraine. According to head of Ukrainian diplomacy, it goes about a very broad bilateral partnership.
Наша мета $1 мільярд підтримки.
Our goal remains unchanged, $1 billion in support, and we are moving confidently towards it. The US has allocated more than $460 million to support key reforms in Ukraine. Besides, thanks to the help of the United States, Ukrainians received about 2.2 million doses of vaccine from COVID-19.
The European Union is ready to act if Russia invades Ukraine. This was stated by President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, at a press conference following the EU summit. She noted the EU continues to call on Russia to de-escalate on the borders of Ukraine, and in case of further aggression, EU is ready to impose serious sanctions.
We maintain our call on Russia to de-escalate tensions and refrain from any further aggression. We would like to be in a situation where relations with Russia are good, but this is very much depending on the choices made by Moscow. So let there be no doubt, if Russia were to move against Ukraine, the Union will be in a position to take sanctions that could extract a massive cost. We have done our work in that respect.
Only Kyiv and 30 NATO members make a decision on Ukraine's membership in the alliance. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg assured President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelenskyy in this. On the last day of the president's visit to Brussels, the issue of the Russian threat and the build-up of forces by Moscow on border with Ukraine remained in the center of European leaders' attention. My colleagues will tell you about the results of the visit.
The working visit of the President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelenskyy to Brussels. At a meeting with Jens Stoltenberg at the NATO headquarters, the Alliance Secretary-General assured the head of state of full support for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine, and noted that it is Russia that builds up its troops on the border with Ukraine, showing its aggressive nature.
We will not compromise on the right of Ukraine to choose its own path. We will not compromise on the right for NATO to protect and defend all NATO allies. And we will not compromise on the fact that NATO has a partnership with Ukraine, which is important for us and for Ukraine, and Ukraine as a sovereign nation, and NATO as an alliance of 30 democracies, of course, have the right to work closely with a close partner as Ukraine. And our cooperation with Ukraine is defensive. It's not in any way a threat to Russia. The aggressor here is Russia.
And this, according to Volodymyr Zelenskyy, is another reason why the Russian Federation does not have any right in decision-making on the issue of our country's membership in NATO. I am very grateful to you, Mr. Stoltenberg, for the clear signal that Ukraine's membership in NATO is a matter between Ukraine and the alliance, and definitely not the choice of any other country anywhere in the world. I sincerely hope that in the future the alliance will continue to hold these positions and will not succumb to threats or red lines drawn by third countries. At the same time, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine Dmytro Kuleba notes that Ukrainian delegation did not manage to get an answer to one important question about Ukraine's membership in NATO.
Єдиний недолік, скажу чесно,
The only drawback, to be honest, was the year when Ukraine becomes a member of NATO. We were not told the date, although we asked, but it was absolutely clearly confirmed that the discussion on when and how will Ukraine become a member of NATO is exclusively a discussion that should take place and will take place exclusively between Ukraine and NATO. On the sidelines of the EU summit, which also took place on December 16th in Brussels, European leaders stressed that Russia must stop escalating on borders with Ukraine, otherwise Moscow will have to face a new batch of sanctions.
Unfortunately, we see the concentration, reinforcement of Russian military forces along Ukrainian border, and probably we face most dangerous situation in last 30 years. I'm talking not only about Ukraine, but I'm talking about eastern flank of NATO, about Baltic region, and I think we have to do everything what is in our hands in order to prevent the worst scenario, which unfortunately we cannot exclude.
Russia has to de-escalate the tensions and to avoid any aggressive actions against Ukraine, because we are the European Union member states, all united in order to support the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine, and any aggressive action will be with higher political and economic costs.
Meanwhile, 3 more EU members can support the European perspective of Ukraine and sign the corresponding declaration. President of Ukraine made such a request during bilateral meetings with heads of governments of Austria, Belgium and Spain. Reported by Vadim Kromer, UATV News.
France is looking forward to progress within the Normandy Format in the coming weeks. This was stated by French President Emmanuel Macron, who spoke at the briefing following the EU summit in Brussels. He stressed that it is necessary to look for ways to involve Russia in an active participation in the dialogue. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz noted that his country also expects to revive the Normandy Format and make it effective.
We had an important discussion with Ukrainian President Zelenskyy, and we very clearly reaffirmed our attachment to the Normandy Format, a willingness to re-engage together with Russia. I had already spoken to Russian President Putin about this a few days ago, and I would like to pay tribute to President Zelensky's commitment, which we clearly felt, to move forward on this issue. We have discussed here during the European Council that it is of the utmost importance for all of us that the borders in Ukraine are not moved, that security exists for all, and this can only be achieved with respect for this principle of common security in Europe. The members of the Council all agree that we especially agree that it must be clear that whoever violates these borders must also expect appropriate reactions.
Searches in the Russian-occupied Crimea. Early in the morning, the security forces broke into the house of the Crimean Tatar Nariman Ametov. Besides him, there were his wife and 3 children. The man was detained. The search lasted for about 40 minutes. The occupation forces seized the phones from the entire family and the Quran. They read out the decree that they would conduct a search, stating that he was allegedly involved in the explosion on the gas pipeline in August. They read out his and 2 more names. He was taken away even before the search. The search was not started until he was taken away. As for the case of the gas pipeline, the occupation authorities of the peninsula previously detained 3 Crimean Tatars. First, Deputy Chairman of the Majlis of the Crimean Tatar people Nariman Ametov and brothers Aziz and Afsan Akhmetovs. They are accused of alleged sabotage on a gas pipeline near the village of Perevalny near Simferopol, which took place on August 23 this year. The program Affordable Financial Leasing 579 was presented at the Ministry of Finance of Ukraine. The state signed contracts with 3 private leasing companies to support micro, small and medium businesses. An entrepreneur will be able to use the program if the business is registered in Ukraine and its ultimate beneficiary is a citizen of Ukraine. The maximum lease amount is 50 million hryvnias and is calculated for 5 years.
What does this allow our entrepreneurs? They have a new financial instrument that can meet their demand for investment. So if an entrepreneur needs a vehicle, equipment for production or provision of services, or even the real estate he uses for commercial purposes, he can turn to our authorized financial companies that have just signed a cooperation agreement with us and get affordable financial leasing.
A ban on smoking electronic cigarettes in public places and selling them to children under 18, as well as increase in fines. The corresponding bill was passed by the Verkhovna Rada the day before. There is an epidemic of tobacco smoking in the country, which is exacerbated by electronic devices, Chief Sanitary Doctor of Ukraine Igor Kuzin says. Every year, 85,000 people die from smoking-related diseases. In addition, electronic cigarettes and devices are popular among teenagers and are just as dangerous as ordinary ones, says Igor Kuzin.
The law is expected to change the situation. It is for the first time that the legislation equates electronic cigarettes to regular ones. I'm sure that this is a considerable step forward, given the prevention measures taken by the government. Besides, I want to note that the bill passed corresponds to the Ukraine-EU Association Treaty.
A vaccination certificate or a negative PCR test and about 3,000 hryvnias per day for 2 persons. All this is needed to celebrate New Year at a ski resort. This year they will work even if the region is in the red zone of quarantine. Our correspondents found out everything about winter holidays in the mountains. Almost 60% of rooms are already reserved. Recalling the previous years, pre-quarantine years, in this period the occupancy was already 100%.
The winter tourist season is gaining momentum in the Carpathians. There is already snow in the mountains and ski resorts are ready to accept vacationers from all over Ukraine. Earlier, people used to book rooms in hotels since the beginning of autumn, but now, according to hotel owners, they postpone booking until almost the day of arrival, all because of fears that the resorts may be quarantined like last year.
People are afraid to plan in advance. In previous years, in September, they could safely transfer prepayment and book rooms, but now they wait till the last moment.
The Ministry of Health has already approved the operating procedure for ski resorts this season. They will work even in the red quarantine zone. However, according to the new rules, tourists without a COVID certificate will not be accepted. Otherwise, the hotel owners will have to pay a fine from 34 to 170,000 hryvnias. We haven't noticed anything special. Only when we checked into the hotel, we were asked to show the certificates of vaccination. Everything works as it did. All the coffee shops, entertainment centers, resort facilities, everything works. Prices for housing in the Carpathian resorts have not changed much compared to last year. The highest are in Bukovel. In the neighboring area, at the resort in Mihovo, a bit lower. Prices will rise as Christmas holidays approach.
This is our standard room. It is the cheapest one. There are 2 twin beds. This is a double room. Heating is individual. The rooms is always warm. All rooms have a balcony. There are very beautiful views.
Extreme tourism has also risen in price. Trips in the mountains, excursions in the mountains, beautiful views, conquering the peaks, and heavy roads, dirt, winding roads, off-road conditions, and so on. An hour of travel by quad bikes costs 1,500 hryvnias. This is twice as much as in summer. Local cuisine has also become more expensive, so far by 10%.
Who will buy borscht from us for 200 hryvnias? Nobody will buy it. Therefore, we try to keep keep prices down due to the fact that we make all the preparations ourselves. In summer we cooked all the pickles ourselves. Now we do everything else with our hands. The vareniki, other dumplings and so on.
Hotel room, meals, equipment rental and ski pass in the ski resort. On average, one will have to pay more than 3,000 hryvnias per day for an active holiday for two in the Carpathians. But even such prices do not spoil the tourist's mood. Everything is fine, I liked everything, we will come again. An active arrival of tourists is expected in the coming weekend because of the weather. Snow is forecast in the mountains in a couple of days. Reported by Volodymyr and Anastasia Lisova, UATV News.
The ministry that is for everyone, the Ministry of Good Deeds, started working in Kyiv. It will function on the basis of the Ministry of Social Policy. And all Ukrainians have a chance to become its ministers. The initiative was proposed by Minister for Social Policy Marina Lazebna. Her idea is to raise funds throughout the country for New Year's gifts for children in need, people with disabilities, as well as lonely elderly people.
Більше 1000 людей зібрали 2000 подарунків.
More than 1,000 people have collected 2,000 gifts that we are going to present today. And those gifts will go to other parts of Ukraine, to children who do not live in Kyiv, but who also deserve a piece of attention from us, from adults, from people who work for the sake of people. I'll tell you honestly, I believe in miracles. I know that there are people and forces that give us inspiration, and everything will be fine in our country. The main thing is that we have peace in the country. The Ukrainian satellite Sich will soon be put into orbit for remote sensing of the planet. It is the first device over the past 10 years that Ukraine launches into space. It was produced by the Yuzhny Design Bureau in Dnipro City, and this is the beginning of the revival of Ukraine as a space state, they assure. Our correspondent visited the workshops of the legendary enterprise.
This is a test footage of the Ukrainian satellite, which will soon transmit images of the Earth from space. More than 200 people worked upon its creation at different stages. Dnipro designers have been actively developing it in recent years.
This workshop was built and equipped specifically to create satellites. It is from here that the Ukrainian satellite Sich-230 was sent to the Space Center at Cape Canaveral.
There is a high-class clean room inside the workshop. This is a prerequisite for assembling a spacecraft. The hit of only one speck on the optics of the spacecraft, which is already in the orbit, will then give us a blurred spot in the results of the survey. In order to prevent this, the corresponding cleanliness conditions are observed during manufacturing. The Sich satellite is designed to acquire digital images of the Earth's surface. From a height of 500 kilometers, it will transmit images with a fairly high accuracy. It can cover an area 46 kilometers wide and more than 1,500 long. The construction of some structures, floods, fires, environmental disasters, movement of columns – this information can be obtained via this satellite. Various Ukrainian companies took part in the creation of the national satellite. They manufactured, developed and tested individual systems and elements. As a result, Sich-230 became the first spacecraft assembled in Ukraine over the past 10 years. The Sich-230 will be launched into orbit by carrier rocket Falcon of the SpaceX company. The satellite has already been delivered to the Space Center. Its launch is scheduled for January 10, 2022. Reported by Volodymyr and Natalia Husak, UATV News.
That's all for this hour. More updates on our official website, YouTube, Twitter and Facebook pages. Thank you for staying with the UATV channel. Goodbye.